All right, everybody, we're about to get started with our presentation. I am extremely honored and proud to be part of Ivy, and most importantly, be communicating with all of you as part of the design community and sharing feedback and collaboration. So let's get started. Treeium General Contractors has been around since 1991, and we've shared and learned many, many experiences. And this will be basically what this presentation is about, of how to pick the proper contractor, what different licenses mean, what communication, what expectations you should have, and how technology really helps move things along with expectations and progress of the job. And also, what is a general contractor really mean for the designer? How is that general contractor like an extension of that designer staff? And then most importantly, the roles and responsibilities. You know, everybody has responsibilities as part of this project. And then I'll end it off with questions and answer, and I'd love to hear your questions and answers and collaboration, and look forward to hearing your feedback. So the three most common type of contractors when you're remodeling, renovating, or building from scratch are the three licenses that I'm going to actually review with you right now. The license number A is more general engineering. So these are people that are very, very skill set for irrigation, flood, water power. So these are a little bit more specialized. This will be more of the commercial side of the contracting business, is usually when you see license A. Now, license number B is what we also have, and this is very, very general. This is general contracting, framing, carpentry, working with wood, the framing, and the whole structure of the building. Here, the general contractor works really closely with such professionals such as yourselves and architects, following along the guidelines and most importantly, the rules and regulations that when you acquire your license, you're supposed to follow. This is very, very common. Always look for license B when you're remodeling and renovating any sort of, whether it's residential or commercial. This is extremely important to look for. And also look for when the licenses have been suspended. When did they get their license? What kind of holes they have in their license. Those are all generic information that you can find on the licensing per the state. So California would have their own California licensing board. And there you look in the licensing and look at the license number and see what their license is all about. License number 3. This is also a very generic one, but also specialized. This is where they're working with flooring, roofing, a little bit more specialized. But this also goes with license number B. So you'll see a contractor that has license number B and another contractor that could be behind them or with them with license number C. So the general will come in to start conducting the job, and then the specialty contractor could be flooring, for example, and they'll put in the marble flooring or whatever the flooring may be. So that would hold a license number C. Now, in these other type of licenses, this is also extremely important. When you have your top 3 on the left-hand side, you start thinking, okay, what else do I need? What else should I be looking for? As you can see, there's a long list of different types of contractors that you can imagine. We here at Treeium, we all have all these specialties, and we bring them on board as the projects come. But again, I cannot emphasize enough, the top 3 on the top left side are the most important licenses that you need to look for. This is another section of also different types of licensing. This is all for the state of California. We also have solar. Solar and roofing is also very, very common. Any states that have the green initiatives and energy save, rebates, you'll find a lot of roofing and solar contractors available. Now, what does it take to be bonded and licensed in the state of California? These are some 3 different points that you need to look for. Is how big is their license bond? They have to have about 15,000 and above. And usually the contract bonds are about 1 to 2% of the contract price. So let's say if it's $1 million, you're going to put it 1 to 2% for the bonds. And that usually covers the insurances. And then the blanket performances and payment bonds are on the right-hand side. And that usually is about 10% over a project that's $10,000. These are 3 different points that I would say are extremely important as a designer to keep them at your back pocket while you're negotiating and looking for the right type of contractor to be your partner. Now we go into the fun stuff, communication and technology. Let's face it, without technology these days, we wouldn't be able to get our jobs done. As we know, Ivy's got a beautiful, beautiful interface. And let's face it, without that type of technology and tool, our lives would be much harder and our jobs would be way harder. And we'd be working 1 job at a time versus maybe 4 or 5 jobs at a time. Now, one of the things that are out there in the marketplace with various sources, there's a username and password that you can have. There's a username and password that you can have with where you can see the progress of the job from any stream and any login around the world. One of the things that other contractors have, and such as ourselves, we do have a portal, an app that we've homegrown and created that shows you the progress of the job with drones and videos and pictures and text messages that we take as the progress of the job continues. The proper type of contractor is really going to be looking at this type of sponsorship and partnership with the designer and architect or homeowner or real estate agent, wherever the partner may be, to make sure that project is running extremely, extremely smooth. There, we have an interface that shows you the pictures, the progress, the payments, what payments have gone through, what contracts have been signed. And I think another thing that's very, very important in this whole communication and technology is looking for an app that is asking questions to the client, wherever that client may be, whether it's a developer, whether it's an architect, whether it's a homeowner, or whether it's the commercial client. Are they happy with the progress of the job? I think technology really should communicate from beginning to end where people's emotions are, people's expectations are, and where we are in the progress of this job. Without that, how do you directly know if you're doing the proper thing? And here, at least with us, we ask our questions as we go along. Every single update we've done in our portal app, we actually ask the clients our questions. Are you happy? Is it up to your expectations? That is really the most important thing, I would say, as a contractor working with all different types of designers, is having complete, transparent communication. Now we'll go through some best practices of general contractors to designer. Obviously, picking the right contractor can be very, very tricky. But these are the top points that I have found working here would be the most important thing. And I'd love to hear your feedback at the end of the presentation. You know, the designer pick the finishes and make sure that everything is done correctly. And one of the things I definitely want to point out that is not actually written here is the difference between a designer and a decorator. A designer is the person that usually knows architectural drawings and construction. A decorator is the person that helps just decorate. Very, very different. So a designer has a little bit more cloud experience, probably a little bit more education, and just a little bit more of an angle edge. So those type of designers are usually the ones that are working with the contractor. And a lot of designers, as we know to this day, have lead, different types of certification, green living, and so on. So that type of transparency and communication and expectation should always be set up front. So here we actually like our designers to pick the finishes and match it accordingly. We help them buy the finishes and go through our licensing and discounts and networks of communication and Rolodex. And then here the designer will pick it out with us. And the designer will work closely, whether it's the client of a homeowner or commercial real estate, whatever it may be. They are holding the hand and making sure everything is done from beginning to end. Most importantly is to have the trust of a designer to a contractor. Let's face it, without trust and communication, you can't get anything done. We like also the designer to have a complete job spec, complete job scope of their job, whatever it may be. More detail, more communication, more drawings, the better. We also like for our designers to have those relationships with key stores and brands to pick out finishes and materials to really guide their client from beginning to end on the expectations of their job, and most importantly, convincing that their vision is becoming into a reality. We consider ourselves a design plus build contractor, and these are the things that we have found that are very, very important to pick the right type of application, the right type of tool of technology. You know, as I said earlier, streamlining communication with your team is crucial, whether digital tools from our app, Ivy's app, whatever you have accessible, is having those ready to go when you're getting the job done. And I also think, even peeling the onion back a little bit further, making sure that you and the contractor have the same applications on your phones, on your iPads, on your computers, across the board. Because when people have different apps and they're not compatible, then the communication goes poor. It's super important to have both there. Obviously, that helps you keep track of your management, your schedules, your expectations, and most importantly, is the client happy? Is the client happy from beginning to end with this progress of the job? And let's face it, as things move along and it's a positive aspect, this will elevate your brand as a designer and helps elevate our brand as a contractor. It's a marriage, it's perfect. Here are some best practices from general contractor to designer. This is the things that you should expect from us. Does the general contractor understand the job scope? What is the job scope? I can't tell you how many times I've seen emails, text messages, and even hearing voicemails that like, what's the job scope? Is it a ground up construction? Is it an addition? What type of addition is it? Is it an ADU? Is it a garage conversion? Is it a kitchen? What style of kitchen is it? All those things need to be clearly communicated. I can't say it enough from day one and line number one. And then number two, creating blueprints and drawings and handing them a complete set to the contractor. And obviously going along with changes, any kind of update changes, communicating that to the contractor. That is very, very important. And again, it goes now with line number three, a clear understanding of what the job scope is going to be, understanding the flavor of the concept of the job. Is it going to be a modern kitchen? Is it going to be classical kitchen? Is it going to be a contemporary? All those things need to be clearly communicated. This obviously will make the time of the project go faster, makes the client happy. And let's face it, if we actually finish the job on time and even earlier, it's a win-win for everybody. At the end of the day, that general contractor should be a true partner of your staff and your extension of your brand, and it should be like a business marriage. Literally, that's one of the most important things to keep in mind. Now, expectations from an interior designer to a general contractor. Now I'm going to flip it. Designer working with the right type of contractor is obviously setting the prices up front, execution of the job. If it's 3 to 4 months, making sure we hit that time frame. And then also telling us, what is the psychological profile of that client? What do they like? What do they don't like? When do they travel? Are they, you know, do they live in Taiwan and have an extra home here in California? All those things need to be assessed and communicated from the beginning. So as the contractor is working with the designer, all those expectations are set up front. And we've heard it all. I mean, we've had, you know, houses that we built from the ground up and the clients are out of town or in another country. So, and we've had clients that actually live in the house while we're creating it, you know, their expectations of their design. So we've seen it all, but all those things need to be communicated in the beginning. So the expectation is set. So obviously the designer won't be successful if the work is not communicated and executed in the right way. And again, those with blueprints, process, rendering, communication, using the right type of apps and communication is important. Again, just kind of reiterating what I said in the previous slides, making sure that general contractor is licensed. And please look them up and make sure they're active. Treeium has had their license since 1991. Other contractors, you have to look them up. Do they even have a physical office? How does the employee or the project manager show up to the job site? Do they show up with a wrapped car? They show up with a uniform? They show up with their ID? All those little details need to be assessed from the beginning. It makes the impression of the communication and the progress of the job positive. Making sure, I can't tell you how many times we've had to reschedule calls because we don't have the drawings. We don't have the proper blueprints. Making sure the general contractor has that from day one is extremely important. Now, from there on out, the general contractor is responsible for permitting and making sure that permit process is running all the way through. And communication, multiple times a day, not just every day, multiple times a day, if needed, to make sure that job is done, is extremely, extremely important. Communication from beginning to end, whether it's financing, whether it's materials being delivered, whether it's wood, whatever it is, all that needs to be addressed. And then the general contractor can help the designer order finishes if they need to. We usually like for the designer to do it themselves because they have a different expertise and a different eye, but we can help them do that, not a problem. And I can't say how important it is to go actually see the job in person. I know that we rely on many apps and applications out there, but there's nothing better than seeing the job in person and sharing that responsibility if needed with the general contractor or project manager. And I mean, I can't say it enough. At the end of the day, we want to be true partners with the design community. This is what we've seen in the past that really works. 9 red flags from a bad contractor. Obviously, it's not delivering the materials at all on time, no communication, very, very fast quotes and estimates made out of thin air without taking measurements, maybe looking at the job scope properly. And then also coming in there and giving really high pressure sales. You got to remodel your bathroom right now, or you got to do this sink right now. Anything like that that's very high pressure is usually a red flag. You shouldn't be salesy. It shouldn't be, come on, you got to do this right now. It should be a consultative person coming in there, offering solutions and offering communication to the designer and saying, this is the expectation of the job that can be done. And not saying unrealistic expectations. I actually look at people that do unrealistic expectations and want to do a job in a month is a huge red flag. Usually the good contractor, number one, they're busy. And number two, they take a longer time to complete that job because they're experts already at that job. They're experts in that field. So usually the time, they won't give you a time, they'll actually add more time. Another thing, no scare tactics. Like, oh, if you don't do this, your house is gonna fall. Or if you don't do that, the foundation's gonna fall. Anybody that says that, another red flag. Look into it more, ask more questions. And let's face it, if they come into the call, they don't have any materials with them, they don't have any pictures of the work they've done in the past, let's face it, another red flag. And referrals, do they have a list of current referrals from all different job types that they've done? From, could be 5 years ago, 10 years ago to last month. Ask for referrals. Also, large payments in advance. Anything that's usually over 10% or 5% or 3% is usually a red flag, depending on the contract. Don't give more than that. And making sure the communication from beginning to end with contracts and payments are done. And here is where a technology app can help you do that. It can make it paperless. It can make you find out when it's been posted. You can find out when the job, when the check has been run through, everything. This is where you rely a little bit more on your apps. And if nothing is in writing, come on, let's face it, we don't do sales anymore with shaking of the hand. I wish, but those days are all long gone. And nothing is in writing, that's a huge, huge red flag. And if you can't get a hold of your general contractor for a while, or they've disappeared and they have horrible time management, also another red flag. Let's face it, there's also another additional characteristics. If they say, I don't understand the contract and we don't understand each other, that's in any single situation you have in life, whether it's a job, personal, or obviously construction. If you don't understand what the contract is about and they don't have a contract, huge red flag. We don't do permits. I'm sorry, the general contractor is in charge of doing the permitting. They should be assisting you from beginning to end with the permitting process instead of grabbing the money and running off with it. That should never happen. Make sure that the right type of contractor that's professional, buttoned up, they say, I got this, I'm gonna handle your permitting process. And they know what city, they know what the contact is, and they communicate to you what's going on with the permitting process. As you know, if you don't get the permits done from the beginning, it can delay the project 6 months, 7 months, sometimes even a year. So this is extremely important on number 2 to make sure the general contractor has those relationships in City Hall to get the permits done. And also, are they showing up on the job? Are they walking on the job? Are they taking pictures? Are they threatening? Are they doing anything unprofessional? No, they're not. These are the things you need to look for. And again, are they asking for awkward payments up front, or a payment that has nothing to do with maybe the delivery that has been made? All those things need to be communicated. And then are they showing up and giving you pictures and updates? Are they giving you emails? Are they giving you, change orders on time? Are they giving you too many change orders? All those things are red flags that you need to look for. Because let's face it, if the general contractor is not good, I don't care how great the interior designer is, it'll fail the job. These are the positive aspects to look for when you're looking for a good contractor. They're always willing to upfront show their insurance, their license, and their references, literally within in the first 10 minutes of that communication from that consultative sales call. What I look for is showing that right out of the gate. And also showing a clear understanding of the contract. What is the job scope? Line by line, making sure everybody's on the same page. Making sure that the contractor understands permitting process, going to City Hall, the local codes, and everything that is going on. Everything changes very quickly, especially in high construction areas such as California, as you guys know. So permitting process and local building codes change quite frequently. The right type of contractor will know that and address it to you right away. And also looking for large payments, again, another red flag, we always take a very small payment up front. And making sure the quality of the materials that we use with our partners that we have are top notch, whatever they may be. And let's face it, showing up on the job on time, even early, showing up actually a little bit outside of the scheduled time frame, making sure that extra effort is put in. And also little details, taking their shoes off, putting a little bit of socks on, making sure everything's clean in the job, respecting that person's house or commercial building, making sure everything is done. And if we have to work from a certain time frame, 8 to 5, 8 to 4, making sure we're in those time frames in the permitting process. And also being open to questions. If you can't get a hold of your contractor for a few hours or days, huge red flag. Our project managers are always accessible by phone, text, or voice. And then also making sure the progress of the job is on time. Are they giving you pictures? Are they giving you text messages? Are they even giving you feedback from your client that sometimes you might not directly get? Those are all really important key points to look for. Now I'd like to show some really quick screenshots and pictures of poor work and good work. As you can see here, I don't really need to say much. The tile work here is self-explanatory. This is a recent remodel that we're doing for a kitchen. This is an example of the good work we've done in the past. Self-explanatory, making sure everything's within the lines and making sure the design and the execution is exactly what the client wants. These are some examples of bad foundation. That's the last thing anybody wants. Bad foundation, this is actually a current job we're working on. And good foundation. Self-explanatory. Again, I can't say it enough. Look up the licensing, look up their portfolio, ask for references. Here are some examples of some of our exciting yet modern and contemporary kitchen designs we've done. As the right is contemporary and the left is modern. The left one is a smart home from top to bottom that we've modeled in Northern California. On the right is a Bel Air bathroom, Bel Air kitchen that we did here in Los Angeles. Here are some other kitchens renovations we've done. The left is a house in Encino. On the right is a house in West Hollywood. And we work, again, different designs, different job scopes, whatever the execution of the job is, we can do it with the right designer, no problem. Positive kitchen renovations. As you can see on the right-hand side, that's a retro yellow kitchen we recently completed. Some people like it, I personally like it. And the one on the left is another modern kitchen that we've done. Again, looking for the licensing, looking for the different types of portfolio and pictures and execution. So I really like to thank everybody. I can't thank everybody enough for logging in and watching my webinar. I'd like to open up the floor right now for any questions that you may have. And here we go. Okay, I got asked, what specific apps do you recommend with clients in the client team? Obviously, Ivy. I do recommend Ivy. We personally have our own app, and we actually created our homegrown application. We actually have a CTO that sits in-house here at Treeium. And here, we actually started creating our app with our CRM and making sure it's up to date. My next question, is your experience of responsibly storing plumbing fixtures on site? And if so, where are they needed? That one actually depends on the job. We've actually remodeled some condominiums that don't have a lot of room for storage for plumbing, and then we put it on another sector of the building. It actually depends on the actual job. So it really depends on what we've seen. I've seen it all over the place on that one. Storing plumbing, I mean, we've even stored it here at the office if needed to be, but we like to actually store it at the job site. So we're accessible to the actual fixtures and what needs to be done. Thanks, Trish. I really appreciate you asking the question. Oh, another question from Trish. How to stop a contractor running too many jobs, or is your job a priority? That's a really great question, actually. We here at Treeium, you can see, honestly, out of the gate, you can tell if that contractor is doing too much. Because you'll see if they're communicating to you, you'll see if their contract is done on time. Within the first 24 to 48 hours, you'll see by their way of communicating to you if they're running too many jobs. And we actually have a maximum. We run only like 4 to 5 jobs a month on certain types of project managers to make sure that their jobs are done from beginning to end on time. Thank you, Trish, for asking the question. And now I'm going to go to Lauren Rivera. Now, one of the examples I can give you for the technology apps and creating schedules is Ivy. Ivy's got a great one. I don't know if you actually subscribe to Ivy, but it's a great tool from beginning to end. Treeium General Contractors has their own app that works very well with Ivy's app. I would look to see what your top priorities are. Is it, the renderings? Is it the project management of the billing? All those things Ivy does actually have. You're just getting in there and seeing what your needs are and working the app as accordingly what your work style is. Thank you, Lauren, for answering the question. Now I'm going to go back to Trish. If a contractor does not have a contractor with the owner, can we be held responsible for their performance? No, that's the contractor's responsibility because that's between the contractor and the owner. And to be honest with you, if a contractor doesn't have a contract with the owner, huge red flag. I actually wouldn't continue working with them. There's nothing in writing. There's nothing to go by. What are you working your designs with? What is the job about? I personally have never seen that before. If anything, I've seen it be paperless. For example, we start working with designer, architect, whoever it may be. Day one, they sign the contract. It's paperless. That's another thing I've seen. But if the contractor does not have a contractor with the owner, that's the contractor's responsibility. Great question. Now I'm going to go to Kat. Should you suggest only 3 or 5% upfront? Here in New York, they go to 30 to 50% upfront on common practice. Here in California, I've actually seen it be about 30 to 40% on common grounds for materials. That actually depends on the designer's working style. Depends what kind of markup you want on your fixtures and your finishes and whatnot. And then contracting is usually between 10 to 30% on the revenue, depending if it's residential or commercial. So that kind of varies, but usually that's all written down in the bottom of the section of the contracts of when things are itemized. Great question. What if a client does not have a permit? Then you really can't do the construction. It's illegal. You don't have any legal grounds to renovate, to build the construction. That's a huge red flag. You need to have a permit, especially if you're doing additions, especially when it's including plumbing, especially when it's including framing and electrical. You need to have a permit. It'll immediately shut the job down, and then you'll be assessed with fees. And possibly you can even lose your license over that as a contractor because you're not following the rules or regulations. It's that simple. Okay, now I'm going to go to Betty Spake. How do you feel about an architect being at JC and bringing in his trades? It depends on the architect. I've seen architects that actually are very astute and working with their own general contractors. Honestly, it depends on the architect. We actually work very well with all types of architects. Again, it boils down to the communication, understanding what the job scope is about, understanding the job responsibilities of each partner. and being on the same page. I actually think it's a great thing if an architect works with a general contractor. What's a good way to find out if they're a reputable contractor, according to Lauren? Thanks, Betsy, for asking the question. Start doing your research. Find out when their license started, what's happened with their license. All that is public information per state. Find out what their complaints are. Go to Yelp, go to their website, go to house.com, go to various online sources to see what other people are saying about that contractor. And trust me, people will be very raw about expressing their emotions, their thoughts when it comes to their home or workspace. Just go online and look for them, Google them. Thanks, Lauren, for asking the question. Now I'm going to go to Melissa. How do you handle the right pricing with the designer if the contract is with the client? I think you should be communicating with the designer line by line of what the expectations are of that client. There should be a budget set in place. What is their budget? Is it $50,000 or is it $500,000? And staying within that budget. All that needs to be communicated up front. Okay, it looks like I have time for one more question because we're about to wrap up. What is the best place in finding your contractor? Normal guys are all busy. That's a great one. I would actually start canvassing the internet and actually start going to events and asking people questions. And again, going back to where I started from, asking for referrals, looking for their portfolio, calling the referrals, talking to the referrals, and possibly even doing a walkthrough in some of their jobs they've done in the past. What kind of homes have they done? Have they done a container home? What's their portfolio? Those are the really, really important questions to ask. I would like to have a system that keeps the conversation threads of the changes of the client that happen. Renee, actually this one we have in our own app, and also Ivy has that in their very own app. You just need to buy the program and their subscription and you have this all within the app. So that's really important to keep. It's everything combined in one setting. There's various apps that you can have. And all that, again, I can't say this enough. Make sure your general contractor and you as the designer have the same application on your phone and have exactly the same communication set, whether it's on your iPad, whether it's Excel, all that stuff, making sure you guys are on the same page before even the contract is signed with the client. It's so important. Thank you, Renee, for asking the question. Jenny Munga, how do you suggest the designer to get paid? Oh, that's a great question. I've actually seen all types of different types of negotiations. The one that is really common here for, I would say, top level designers, they ask, very similar to an attorney. They ask for an upfront deposit for $5,000 or $10,000, and then they bill them hourly after that. Or they go by the time frame of the job. Say the job is going to be 3 to 4 months, they'll charge them monthly or hourly. That's what I've seen. Or they'll take, a third type I've seen is they'll take the total percentage of the construction cost and take 30% or 40% for design and architecture. That's another way to do it. So those are the 3 common grounds I've seen. Deposit, go hourly. Number 2, getting paid of the whole extension of the job, whether it's per month or per day. And then number 3, getting paid as the job goes on, whether it's daily, hourly, whatever the case may be. So there's 3 different types of negotiations you can do. Thanks, Jenny, for asking the question. Now I'm going to go back to Trish. If you bring the contractor into the job, do you expect a finder's fee? I have not done this before, but I've heard about this done before. What we do is a referral fee. We've heard referral fees be a little bit more common because we want to grow our portfolio and grow with designers as they grow. So say, for example, as the designer comes into the job and they don't have a contractor, we'll go with them on that initial meeting with the client. We'll sit there as an extension of their staff to ask questions, going, whatever the case may be. We'll let the designer be the lead of that job meeting, the initial job meeting, the consultative job meeting. It's not going to be a sales meeting. And then we're there with the designer to answer any questions they may have, whether it's construction, whether it's finishes, whether it's time frame. And also, I would say a good contractor is really good about not giving the proper, like a job scope money out front. is going back to the office and going back and looking up the job scope thoroughly to give an accurate job pricing. Those are the kind of things you should look for. Oh yeah, the finder's fee. We offer a referral fee. We offer a referral fee, and it depends on the actual job scope. It could be from anywhere from 2% all the way up as 5%. But we definitely, instead of a finder's fee, we call it a referral fee. So after you start working with us, let's say you bring in the client and that is the designer's client, we give that designer at the end of the job a referral fee. And that's negotiated in the beginning of the contract when we sit down and meet with the designer. And we're always wanting to work with different types of designers and be a partner that, that consistently pays and grows your business, and we grow our business. Oh, somebody just asked me if we have a good example of a contract between designer and contractor. We do. It's actually within our portal, and we actually itemize the job scope. For example, flooring is written on the top, framing is written in the middle. We actually go by what the classification is per the job. But I can definitely send everybody an example of what makes a good contract, what the contract should look like. Somebody asked me to mention the clarification of the 30-40%. That's a great question. The 30-40%, that's negotiated up front, because you're looking at the job scope and then you're saying, okay, what's the designer's profit? Am I gonna make 30% over this overall job? That should be as part of the designer's contract from the very, very beginning when they acquire that client, whether the client's a homeowner or a commercial real estate homeowner or owner, whatever it should be. All that needs to be clarified up front. Just think about the hours you're gonna be putting into this job. Is it gonna be taking you 8 hours, 10 hours a day? The driving, the communication, are you gonna have to hire your assistant back for this job? All those different things should be communicated, and then that's when you start gauging the 30 or 40% profit as a designer. Yeah, somebody said about sharing a contract. I will definitely share a contract up front when we get it. Here at Treeium as a contractor, so after we sign it on board with the designer, architect, whoever it is, that is all itemized. And what should a contract be with the designer and contract, designer, client, and client, designer, contractor? Well, the responsibilities, that should be on the first few pages, what the client expectations are gonna be, what the designer's execution is gonna be, and what the contractor's gonna be. The contractor should write the time they're gonna be there, the parking spaces they're gonna need, the HOA permitting process, the insurances, all that is itemized in the first or second page of the contract as a contractor. The designer, I actually let them write and fill that in, because every designer has their style of design. And then the designer should actually be writing the price per square foot. Is it $2? Is it $4? Is it $5? All that should be itemized in the contract. So when the client receives that contract and you start negotiating, all the expectations have been met. So making sure this price per square foot is like what Judith is telling me, is extremely, extremely important. And that should be finalized between designer and contractor, or designer and client. What's the typical price per square foot? I've seen, God, there's no typical. I've seen it range from $3 all the way up to $6. It depends. It depends where the construction's at. In Palm Springs and Santa Barbara, construction's a little bit more expensive. Why? Because the accessibility to those cities. In LA, it varies per price. So to be honest with you, it's across the map, because it depends on where the job is gonna be. Is the typical price for a new construction? Yeah, new construction, I've seen it vary. It's anywhere between $4 to $5, even $6 per square foot. And in Palm Springs, I heard it be $10 per square foot. Oh, okay. Courtney just asked a very good question. What's the hardest lesson you've learned, and what did you take from it? I would say the hardest lesson I think I've learned was communication and expectations not being met up front. We had a situation many years ago that those need to be set up front, and then as the job took off, there was a few too many job changes done. So that was a learning experience on both angles. All right, Katie O'Neill is asking a really good question. You mentioned a law about contractor for split jobs. Does your company have specialty where your city does not permitting additions. For example, San Francisco does not allow. Yes, we find that up front. We actually go look at the job and see where it's at, look at the address, and then start backtracking it. Then we go, okay, this is where this job is. Is it an R2 zone home? Is it an R1 zone home? And then we backtrack it of going back to the city and seeing what the permitting is. So when we go on that initial call with the designer, we already have kind of like in our back pocket what that city will allow. That is extremely important. We already will have that on that initial call. So if the client says, I want 3 stories, we already have to kind of burst their bubble sometimes and saying, you know what, you can only do 1. You can't do 2. And this is the reason why. And that's really what the contractor or project manager should bring to the table. How do you do when a contractor disses the designer in order to cover their problems? That's a great question. Well, a contractor shouldn't be dissing any designer. They should be working hand in hand with that designer. And if they disagree with their design concept, they should say it in a professional way and say why. Look, the city might not permit it. It has to be 10 feet. It has to be a certain time. It's usually permitting and process that needs to be discussed. No dissing should be involved. It should be professional from top to bottom and beginning to end. Okay, Kat asked me a really good question. How do you handle a situation when a client is so indecisive of when the start date is and multiple bids are given without a pricing? You know what? I actually let that kind of take its course, because when a client sees that you know what you're talking about and you come in there very professional with the white glove service, that usually makes their decision become easier. Like us, what do you look for in a product? What do you look for in a car? What do you look for in construction? If that person's not buttoned up and come up front professional, you probably won't hire them. You probably won't want to give them a deposit. So that's why being on the same page with the designer, even before we meet with the client, is super important. Thank you, Katie, for the compliment. Courtney, would you prefer the designer to manage the contractor or go through the designer? That actually depends on the style of designer. For ourselves, we like to take our own contract and our own deposit for the construction. Some designers, we do marry the contract into one. Most of the time, the designers keep it separately because the designer has maybe more hours to add, or they have to go get the finishes for the client. So I've seen it mostly be separate. The contractor and the designer have separate contracts. And then there's one contract that, like I mentioned earlier, about the referral fee. And that's something that they get at the very end. All right, Judith asked a really good question. Do you have any work with contractors and vendors in Iowa? Yep, absolutely. We have a long list of partners that we have in the marketplace in the whole state of California of different types, whether it's cabinetry, whether it's fireplaces, whether it's, glass, sculptured staircases. We have it. Just from the years that I think we've been in business and in the state that we're in, we're very fortunate to have those partnerships. Okay. Oh, Julie just asked another question. Can a designer bring their own vendor? Absolutely. We actually prefer that sometimes, because sometimes we're not a designer. We don't want to be a designer. We're builders. We're construction. We're building your job scope. We're building your vision. So if you have that vendor relationship, please bring it. Julie, how many contractors and designers purchase materials? Again, that should be set up front from the beginning with the expectations. Is it the contractor going to do it and drop it off at the job scope, or is it designer going to do it? I've seen both. It actually depends on the style of the designer and the contractor. That should be decided and mentioned in the beginning. That's a really good question, actually. Is it customary to an electrician to give a referral fee to a designer? I've seen it done. Why not? If you're bringing in the client and the electrician's doing the job, why not? Well, Julie asked a really good question. Can you talk about the legal standpoint, how a designer is liable for the project of the state of California? It actually depends if the designer is licensed or not. It depends how that contract is written. But anything that you say in the time frame, in the state of law, in the state, it's in writing. So you're actually definitely responsible for what you put in writing in the contract. Okay, here's some more coming in. Trish just asked, where are you based? Do you prefer your contract relations to refer to us if we're not in your location? Well, through our app, we actually make it seamless and paperless because you're seeing text messages, you're seeing the paper, you're seeing the pictures, you're seeing the video of the job. We actually work with quite a few designers that are bi-coastal. They're in New York, and then they have clients in Palm Springs or in Bel Air and Pacific Palisades. We get their drawings, we get their blueprints, we go to the job scope, we get their permits done, and everything is done paperless. And actually exactly what we're doing right now through webinars, through the internet, through technology. So honestly, the designer doesn't even have to be here. Who has to be there at the job scope every day is the contractor. They're the ones that are executing the job. Okay, on the right-hand side here, Kathy, I prefer to purchase my materials, but I want the contractor to tell me how much the product is for his installer will need. Absolutely, that should be written in the contract. That should be written in the change orders. I actually prefer that as well. I'm on the same page as what Kathy said. Thank you, Tony, for realistic promises and being honest and being communicative. Kat, a trustworthy contractor, knowledgeable, doing what you're saying you're gonna do, beginning to end, and being upfront, and getting so. Thank you for the talk. Absolutely, I can't agree with you more. And according to Judith, absolutely, the contractor project manager, superintendent will be there at the job daily. We actually don't have that issue. We have the issue of them probably being there too long and working, maybe ahead of time. We want to be there. We put our stamp of our company as Treeium, being a contractor, with pride, and we make sure that everything's done right from beginning to end. The last thing we want is customer dissatisfaction. We want them to be unsatisfied and hit their goals and dreams. All right, Molly, I thought this was great, but I mostly wanted to focus on commercial design. I thought it was extremely practical focus on the area for the contractor to bring red flags, typically a source of 3 bids for each job. Absolutely, we actually prefer to have different bids. We actually just won a bid for a client who had 15 bids. And you know what? That person was very knowledgeable of exactly what they wanted. You have something to compare by. Apples to apples, oranges to oranges. I prefer that client to get other bids because then you have something to compare by. Absolutely. Absolutely. You mentioned a lot of specialty contractors for specific jobs. Does your company have specialists? Does the city? Yes, we do. For example, the contractor permitting San Francisco building roof decks and rooftops additions. Yes, we do. We actually have that within our wheelhouse. We have to because there's so many different additions, so many different specialties. We actually have that as part of our staff. They come on board as the jobs come on board, depending what jobs we're working on. I like what Courtney's comment is here on the right-hand side, is that, again, that is all important, what I've been saying for the past 45 minutes, making sure that communication is set from the beginning so mistakes don't happen. And if a mistake does happen, a good contractor has a solution in place. Hey, the stairs didn't come in on time, for example, but they're coming in tomorrow at 5 p.m. I'm personally gonna be there while they're being dropped off. Those are the things you need to look for a contractor. Those communication keys set up front. I'm a consultant, so I work a lot with contractors regularly. I see most challenges at the end details. Snag list, absolutely. We catch it all here at Mideast. We often get them to fine tune at the very end of the complete of the project. Again, that boils down to communication. What kind of communication do you have, Tony, with your contractor? What kind of tools do you have? Molly, I can't agree with you more. A good contractor is trustworthy and manages the project honestly. Again, I can't say it enough. Go on Yelp, go on house.com, call their references, go see their work. The work and the communication will speak for themselves. Go to do they have a YouTube channel? We have at least 20 videos of our YouTube channels of realistic testimonials of our clients because our clients is our future work. You are our client. You, the community of designers, are our clients. We want to work with you guys and we want to grow your portfolio and our portfolio. I'd love to have 2-part, go more in depth between contracts and designer. Yeah, maybe I'll create a presentation on that. That's a really good thought. I like that, Letitia. Thank you. I meant to say, now going back to Tony, I meant to say any tips of going them forward, not to slip at the very end. Tony, we here at Treeium personally have our application. We ask questions every single, there's and engagement with the app. For example, a picture was taken of the job for the bathroom remodel. The tile was put in. We immediately ask questions. Do you like the tile? Is this your expectations? 3 questions. So then as the client and as the designer, as the contractor, nothing is being slipped at the very end because we're asking questions up front. Great question, Tony. Okay, now we're going back to Joanne. Is it confusing for the client to have 2 contracts? One for the designer and one for the contractor? Shouldn't there always be one? No, because it depends how the contract is written. Ours are very, very beyond simple, itemized from top to bottom for the category of the job. I've seen it done both ways. It actually depends on who you're dealing with, who's your audience. We can work both ways. We can make the job scope, the designer contract and contractor into one contract, or we can keep them separate. I've seen them both. Do you actually have questionnaires for your clients to fill out pertaining for each room and space being designed? We don't have questionnaires. I've seen very top-notch designers ask those questionnaires from the beginning, because then that's where they start creating their job scope. That's a really good thought. I love that, Judith. I've seen various designers do that. As they're actually in the consultative meeting from the beginning, they do that. They ask questions from their client. What style room do you want? How do you envision this bathroom? What kind of time period do you want? Do you want an Italian villa? Do you want a modern, design? Do you want a leach kitchen? Do you want a bathroom? All those are answered up front. And really, really detailed architectural interior designers are the ones that ask those questions, from my experience. Again, great questions, great questions. Due to the area, I'd like to know the top 3 marketing strategies to convince a contractor to collaborate with your design firm. We do CEU classes here as part of Treeium. We offer the design community and architect community different education sources. It could be water irrigation, it could be insulation, it could be roofing. We offer that on a monthly basis. And then going to events, I would say taking an office tour of that contractor. How does the office look like? How does their truck look like? How do they look like as a person? Because that will speak volumes of their marketing strategies of how you're going to be married to them to execute the job. I mean, I'm asking you guys all to marry us. We're all want to grow this business and be together as a partner, as a true business partner. So asking those questionnaires and asking those questions should be said completely upfront. Usually those consultative calls take anywhere from 1.5 hours to 2 hours, because all these questions need to be flushed out from the beginning. And we personally like to meet our designers with the project manager before we meet the client. So they have a kind of a sense of what their personalities are and what the expectation is of the job. We do this all the time. Okay, sometimes the client has their own contractor. Any advice on that? Well, we run into this also all the time. We like to, we just like to meet with the homeowner and say, meet with us. You might have a contractor for this project. For the future, keep us in mind. Sometimes, even though they might have another contractor, we sometimes are selected for various reasons. So we've done that multiple times. But if they have their own contractor, it's fine, and we'll be considered for the next project. The designer does not always know the contractor. That's very true. That is very true. Sometimes we're brought in by the homeowner or the owner of the property, and then we're working with the designer. I think the key is being professional and being communicative with the designer as a contractor up front. What's our Instagram? Treeium, Treeium. I definitely love to give you guys an example of a contract. Whatever you guys may need as a resource center, please consider me as your partner. Thank you, everybody. I really, really appreciate it.